You're driving home from the range. Red and blue lights flash in your rearview mirror. Your heart rate spikes, not because you did anything wrong, but because you have a legally concealed firearm on your hip. The officer walks toward your window, and in the next 60 seconds, you're going to face 3 traps that turn law-abiding gun owners into felony suspects. Today, I'm revealing all 3 traps and the exact words to counter each one. Here's what most concealed carriers don't understand. A traffic stop is an investigation. The officer doesn't know you're a responsible gun owner. The officer doesn't know you have a clean record. All they know is there's a weapon in the vehicle. And from this moment forward, everything you do and everything you say is being evaluated through that lens. Officers receive specialized training on armed driver encounters. They're watching your hands. They're reading your body language. They're listening to every word. One wrong move, one poorly timed reach, one sentence that sounds like you're hiding something, and a routine traffic stop becomes a felony stop with guns drawn and you face down on the pavement. I've studied hundreds of these encounters. I've seen responsible gun owners arrested because they didn't know these 3 traps existed. And I've seen other gun owners drive away in minutes because they knew exactly what to say. Let's break down the first trap. You're pulled over. The officer asks for license and registration. Simple enough, right? You reach for your glove box. But here's the problem. Your firearm is on your right hip, or maybe it's in the center console, or stored in that same glove box with your registration, and you just made a sudden movement toward a weapon with an officer standing 3 feet from your window. This is trap number 1, the documentation reach. It seems completely innocent. You're just complying with a routine request. But officers are trained to watch your hands from the moment they approach. A sudden reach toward your hip or console triggers an immediate threat response. Now you're looking down a drawn weapon being ordered out of your vehicle. Being compliant nearly got you shot. Here's how you counter this trap. Before the officer even reaches your window, you do 4 things. You turn off your engine. You roll down your window. You place both hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. And you do not move them until you've had a conversation. When the officer says license and registration, you do not reach for anything. Instead, you say these exact words. Officer, I want to comply with your request. Before I reach for anything, I want you to know I have a valid concealed carry permit, and I am currently carrying. How would you like me to proceed? Let me break down why this works. First, you've announced you're a legal carrier, not a criminal, a permit holder. Second, you've told them a weapon exists before they discover it themselves. Third, and this is critical, you've handed control of the next steps to them. You're asking how they want to proceed. This signals cooperation, not confrontation. The officer might say, keep your hands on the wheel and tell me where the firearm is located. Or they might say, that's fine, go ahead and get your documents slowly. Either way, they're in control. You're safe. And you've just demonstrated you're exactly the kind of responsible gun owner they have no reason to fear. Here's what happens when you don't do this. Officer approaches, says license and registration. You reach toward your glove box. Officer sees your shirt lift, spots the holster. Suddenly you hear gun, gun, gun. You're ordered out at gunpoint, hands behind your head, proned out on asphalt. Even after they confirm your permit, you've been publicly humiliated, your car has been searched, and you may still face charges for failing to notify in certain states. All because you reached before you spoke. But that's not even the trickiest trap. Trap number 2 is the duty to inform confusion. And this one gets law-abiding gun owners arrested even when they think they're doing everything right. Here's the trap. Depending on what state you're in, you may or may not be legally required to tell the officer you're armed. Some states have mandatory duty to inform. You must tell the officer immediately upon contact that you're carrying. Other states only require you to inform if directly asked, and other states have no duty to inform at all. The trap is this. Most concealed carriers don't know which type of state they're in, and officers know this. So here's what happens. You're in a state with no duty to inform. Officer asks, do you have any weapons in the vehicle? You think you're being helpful. You think honesty is the best policy. So you say yes. I have a gun. Sounds reasonable, right? But here's what you just did. You volunteered information during a criminal investigation, and depending on how that encounter goes, your voluntary statement can be used to justify a search, to extend the stop, to claim you were nervous or evasive about other things. In Salinas versus Texas, the Supreme Court ruled that your silence can be used against you unless you explicitly invoke the Fifth Amendment. But they also made clear that volunteering information waives that protection entirely. Here's the counter. Know your state's law before you ever get pulled over. If you're in a duty to inform state like Texas, Ohio, or Nebraska, you must disclose immediately. Use the exact words I gave you earlier. Officer, I have a valid concealed carry permit and I am currently carrying. How would you like me to proceed? But if you're in a state with no duty to inform, and the officer asks, do you have any weapons? You have a choice. You can disclose voluntarily, or you can say, Officer, I'm not discussing my personal property today. I'm happy to comply with any lawful orders. That phrase is legally protected. You're not lying. You're not being confrontational. You're exercising your Fifth Amendment right to remain silent on matters that could be incriminating. Will the officer like it? Maybe not. But Pennsylvania versus Mims established that officers can order you out of the vehicle regardless. And Rodriguez versus United States says they cannot extend the stop to investigate something unrelated to the original traffic violation without reasonable suspicion. Your silence on the weapon question does not create reasonable suspicion. Your nervousness about the question doesn't either. Here's the wrong way this plays out. Officer asks any weapons in the car? You say, yeah. I have my carry gun. Officer says, where is it? You say, on my hip. Officer says, I'm going to need to secure that for my safety. Step out of the vehicle. Now your firearm is in their hands. You're standing on the roadside. And what started as a broken taillight is now a 30-minute detention while they run your serial number, check for warrants, and decide whether to search your vehicle. Here's the right way. Officer asks any weapons in the car? You say, Officer, I'm not discussing my personal property, but I'm happy to comply with any lawful orders. Officer says I'm asking for my safety. You say, I understand, officer. I'm not being uncooperative. I'm just exercising my rights. Is there anything else you need from me for the traffic stop? You've stayed calm. You've stayed polite. You've asserted your rights without being confrontational. The officer can still order you out of the vehicle. That's legal under Mims. But they cannot search you or your vehicle without consent or probable cause, and you haven't given them either. Now let's talk about trap number 3, and this is the one that catches even experienced gun owners. The officer says, for my safety and yours, I'm going to secure your firearm during this stop. Sounds reasonable, sounds professional, sounds like standard procedure, but here's the trap. The moment you consent to them taking your firearm, you've consented to a seizure. And that seizure can open the door to a search. They'll remove the weapon, they'll check the serial number, they'll run it through the system. They'll check if it's loaded and with what ammunition. Some states have restrictions on hollow points or magazine capacity. If anything comes back questionable, your routine traffic stop just became a gun investigation. In Terry versus Ohio, the Supreme Court established that officers can conduct a limited pat-down for weapons if they have reasonable suspicion you're armed and dangerous. But you being a legal concealed carrier does not make you dangerous. Your permit establishes the opposite. And a fishing expedition through your legally owned firearm is not a Terry frisk. Here's the counter. If the officer says, I need to secure your weapon, you say, Officer, I don't consent to any searches or seizures. I'm happy to keep my hands visible and follow your instructions for everyone's safety. Let me repeat that phrase because it's critical. I don't consent to any searches or seizures. I'm happy to keep my hands visible and follow your instructions. You're not refusing to comply with lawful orders. You're refusing to consent to a discretionary seizure. There's a legal difference. If the officer insists, say, Officer, are you ordering me to surrender my firearm or asking for my consent? If it's an order, you comply. Then you document everything and fight it in court. If it's a request, you've already declined, politely, legally. Here's the wrong way. Officer says I'm going to need to take that gun for safety. You say, okay, sure. You hand it over. Officer takes it back to the patrol car, runs the serial number, comes back and says this firearm was reported stolen in 2019. You say that's impossible. I bought it from a dealer, but now you're in handcuffs while they sort it out. Turns out there was a clerical error in the system. Happens more than you think. But you've just spent 2 hours detained, your gun has been seized pending investigation, and you're hiring a lawyer to get your own property back. All because you consented. Here's the right way. Officer says I'm going to need to secure that firearm. You say, Officer, I don't consent to any searches or seizures. My hands will stay on the steering wheel. I'll follow any instructions you give for safety. How would you like to proceed? Officer says I'm not asking, I'm telling you. You say I understand. I want to make clear for the record that I'm complying under your orders, not giving consent. Then you comply. Slowly. Announcing every movement. My hands are moving to my hip now. I'm lifting my shirt. I'm removing the firearm with 2 fingers. You've protected your legal rights while maintaining complete physical cooperation. If that seizure was unlawful, everything they find gets thrown out in court under the exclusionary rule. Let me put all 3 traps together. Trap 1. The documentation reach. Never reach for anything until you've announced you're carrying and asked how to proceed. Hands stay at 10 and 2 until the officer gives you instructions. Trap 2. The duty to inform confusion? Know your state. If you have a duty, disclose immediately. If you don't, you can exercise your Fifth Amendment right. Officer, I'm not discussing my personal property today. Trap 3. The consent to secure trick. Don't consent to seizure of your firearm. State clearly, I don't consent to any searches or seizures. If they order you, comply, but make clear you're complying under duress, not consent. There's one final thing every armed driver needs to know. Physical safety comes first. Always. Keep your hands visible at all times. Announce every movement before you make it. My hands are going to the glove box now. Stay calm. Stay polite. Say, officer, not bro or man or buddy. Never argue on the roadside. The fight is in court. If you win the argument but get shot, you didn't win anything. If this video helps you feel more prepared for your next traffic stop, I'd appreciate a subscribe. It helps more gun owners find this information. This video is educational content only and not legal advice. Consult an attorney licensed in your state for specific legal guidance. One more thing. What happens when an officer asks to search your vehicle even though you've done everything right? I break down the exact words to use in my next video, because the wrong answer to that question costs people their freedom every single day. Remember, the smartest gun owners aren't the ones who talk the most, they're the ones who know exactly when to stop talking.